I'll just say, so welcome everyone. So I just wanted to make a little podcast. I got Rilo here and Jake all right on. I'll introduce them in a second. And I just wanted to talk about a little bit about like why did Bungie make Marathon? Because the game has been getting a lot of hate or negative feedback, but there's also a lot of people liking it. So I wanted to dissect some of the reasons that people are, or they're just kind of like some polarizing opinions on it, and maybe why they're so negative, kind of digest like why that might be the case. Because I think a lot of people who are really negative about it, might enjoy it. We're not trying to force anyone to like it, but we're just kind of trying to share our perspective on it. I think the way I look at it is maybe, for some people, it might just be a new food you got to try, and we're going to try to help you understand what Marathon is, what it is an extraction shooter, and how you can enjoy it. But yeah, so I got Rilo here. He's makes really really good quality videos, focusing probably on extraction shooters, FPS games. I think he does a good breakdown analysis on art and everything else. So thanks for joining us, Rilo.
Yeah, of course.
Anything you want to add on to your resume, or as you think about got it?
I yeah, I mean, I think it is. It's definitely a funny reality that I do have so much of that genre in my repertoire because it's not really something that I think of myself as being like my thing, but I think it's just a recency thing for me. Honestly, it's just what I've been into the most recently. So um, in the grand scheme of things, I like all kinds of games, but I just happen to have played a lot of those recently.
Yeah. So, anyways, I met Rilo playing doing some play tests with Bungie, and he kind of like helped me understand because I never knew what extraction shooter was, even though I'm making these old videos on classic marathon. So he really helped me understand what it is and why people enjoy it. But then also we have Jake the All Right. He started a marathon community all the way back from even before, like right when it was announced. So, and he's Jake has been really good about creating a community. He makes a lot of videos all over the place, but mostly probably focused on lore. But he's really just made an excellent community for everybody, and he's become my friend. So I love you, Jake, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
And I love you, Joko. I do like to think of myself now primarily as a food YouTuber, specifically making dishes from Marathon the game. So that's going to be my primary stint now, drinking liquid cheeseburgers, eating beef packages, stuff like that. So
Yeah, a new caloric diet.
Delicious.
Well,
and
Jake, you
synthetic.
you can do the honors of introducing me because I know you're so good at it.
And I am. I'm very good at. And hosting this excellent podcast is Joku, the number one marathon YouTuber on the planet. Collection of classic Bungie games in depth across many great videos, sharing lore, tips, tricks, giving you the background history and everything else you could want to know. Featured on the Marathon story page and the Pathways into Darkness story page, hosted by the one and only Hamish Sinclair. It is Joku. Joku, how you doing?
Thank you, Jake. I'd have to say, Jake, you are more than all right. I'll just say that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so first off, we want to talk about just understanding what is this newer marathon game. Like, what is it? Trying to wrap our heads around it. Like, why did? So first off, maybe Jake would be good to answer this. Why did Bungie decide to make this new game in the marathon universe?
Well, I can't speak directly for them or say exactly why they chose to do that. I do think that a lot of people have worked on this. It from what they've said in interviews, it seems like the project is going back to like the late 2010s, 2019, maybe even Joseph Cross talking about 2018 in terms of conceptualizing the idea, and then it was it's changed hand multiple times and had different game directors and stuff. So I don't know necessarily why they ultimately landed on this, but I do think like Bungie throughout all of their games likes to circle back on ideas and concepts, and they kind of use similar themes throughout all of their games. While simultaneously, I feel like they kind of stay at the forefront of FPS in a lot of ways. Now, you can look back at like Oni and Myth and stuff, but if you look back at even Pathways, and then Marathon was the first, in a lot of ways with. The verticality and the aiming and dual wielding, or I guess there was another game that released the same day, but also net maps and Forge mode and Marathon Infinity and network FPS gaming. They've kind of tried to expand in all of those areas as they come to the forefront of what's popular in gaming. That obviously carries through with Halo being such a major success and kind of, I feel like in a lot of ways, bringing the FPS to a large group of people who probably weren't traditionally into FPS games, where maybe things were more like, Doom and Half-Life and stuff like that, were maybe more niche experience. Although very huge and massive, Halo was kind of a cultural phenomenon that kind of expanded past gaming. And I think they did something very similar with Destiny, where they wanted to make this MMO that had this FPS flavor. And I think that obviously had 10 years and is still going, 10 years of kind of really big success in a lot of ways, and kind of created an experience that you can't really get anywhere else, I think, even still. I mean, there's a lot of games that do similar stuff and Warframe and things like this, but I think they try to stay, kind of on the cutting edge of what FPS is doing. And I think in a lot of ways, the extraction genre has kind of become that as we've kind of developed more technology that allow us to have more dynamic things occurring in multiplayer games with more people connecting. Extraction games are kind of blending all of the tension and variability that makes the multiplayer experience so engaging from a lot of different avenues. And now you get to experience the PvE element, the PvP element, the having items, having moving objects that aren't players and stuff like this. I guess just from like a technological standpoint. And so I think maybe one of the reasons why they chose to kind of utilize Marathon as a vehicle for that is because it's a world that has a lot of depth to it, but also could be explored in a different avenue and be reimagined and molded in ways that like Halo and Destiny and maybe even Myth to a certain extent can't, because their worlds are kind of locked to certain concepts or ideas, or they've already expanded on them through a bunch of different games. So I think circling back to that while still kind of staying at the kind of forefront of what's available in the FPS experience maybe is kind of what led them down this road. And then ultimately they're a company, so probably money played a hand in it as well. They're seeking that sweet profit, like all the great glorious mega corporations they're giving us in the game. So I think that's kind of the idea. And like I said, going back to it, if you talk to a lot of the people who've been around the Marathon community for a very long time, like Tree Llama, one of the ALF1 developers or ALF1 developers, he was in the first ever online game of Marathon. So the first time that they actually got online is working there, playing on the net, he was there. And I think even a lot of those guys who are kind of more tied to the older games and maybe not super, hip and up to what it takes to grind out an extraction shooter, still respect conceptually that Marathon is staying alive in this way of like, bringing the kind of cutting edge of multiplayer stuff. And so I think that kind of is a piece of it as well.
Yeah, and I think also, like, some people might get upset with me saying this if they're talking about like hating the game, but I think Bungie actually loves and cherishes the Marathon IP, and they actually like really love the story, and they thought they really wanted to bring a new story to it. And I think a lot of people get this idea, and I'm not saying they're wrong to be upset or anything, but that like they're kind of just how do I say it? Like, not respecting their old IP, but I think they actually really like it, and they wanted to create a new game in that universe, because they thought the new game would really fit in that universe, and they want to expand on the story that they told way back when in a new way. And so I think that's part of it too. When you're specifically talking about Marathon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair to say.
How far did you get into the classic Marathon game, Rilo?
Oh, I mean, I mostly just know the story by proxy of having read it. I haven't played much original games at all. I mean, that's significantly before my time.
Yeah.
But
Well, it was for me too.
I know the story just.
I didn't play it till like, I don't know, shortly before I started my in-depth series because I started studying it, like a year before or so, and then I've been delving into it. But, anyways, actually, I've got into the old Bungie games because of Myth, which was interestingly Christopher Barrett's favorite game, also. But, anyways,
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think I told you at some point it was really always a thing that was adjacent to Halo for me, and that was like my association was the sort of progenitor of a lot of things, right? Um, but that was always how I knew it, even way back in the day. But it was a mash game, right? So I never like had a chance to really even try it until more recently when they did come out. And I played them a little bit. Like,
and
it's
now,
just that kind of game was never something that I was around. But I was always interested in the world of it, mostly because of its association with hip hop, but also just the more that I looked into it, I was like, oh, there's a lot going on here. It's very interesting.
So Jake, or I mean, I'm sorry, Rilo. Something I would like to get your perspective on is why do you think maybe Bungie chose to make the new Marathon game in the extraction shooter genre? What do you think about that?
I mean, I would venture to guess that it was a pitched idea quite a long time ago, probably around the original, like when that genre was first kind of existing, right? I think everybody saw the potential of it in the gaming industry, and it's very clear with how many attempts we've seen in the years, like 2017 to now, right? I think everybody saw the potential of it as something new and exciting. So I would assume that was where it came from. I think that the idea that they would ever have made a single player campaign game again is kind of preposterous to me. I don't think that that's ever something they would have ever done, regardless of what genre they did. I mean, they've never made, the same genre of thing for more than 10 years, right? So, I mean, I guess you could say Marathon and Halo are similar. Hold on.
Yeah, and talk about single
This is the
player.
issue with
Are you still going, Rilo, or are you done?
Yeah, no. If you can hear me, fine. I'm not
Yeah, but you can
over. Okay. Yeah, no. I mean, I think that was probably it. Is they were like, this is something really interesting that we want to try. And then I would assume. I mean, again, I'm just a total guessing here. It's like I would assume that they saw the storytelling potential of the genre and knew that what they could do is take an existing IP that had basically been dormant and nothing had been being done with it for close to 30 years. And we're like, okay, we have this as a background, and this is actually the way that I always saw it is that it's like this is the perfect genre to adapt a story world that has never been seen visually in like truly high fidelity. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't like taking Halo or taking, The Last of Us or like some, very visual storytelling based world and making a non-visual storytelling based world out of it. Like they're taking this a story world that is almost entirely existing within this, and they're going, okay, but there's such rich, it's basically like a book. It's almost like adapting a book, right? And you're like, here's the basis for this world that we can do so much with storytelling wise, potentially, with this genre that's very exciting or new. That would be my guess, right? I don't know that for a fact, but that would line up with everything that I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. And I also piggybacking on you saying that like they wouldn't make another single player game. I mean, if you really look at all of Bungie's games, after Pathways into Darkness, almost all of them have been multiplayer focused, even though they've had a campaign, right? And a very good campaign at that for the ones that had single player. But it seems like multiplayer has always been their main focus. So, and just like digging into more about like how they tell the story, I think one of the reasons, and maybe Jake, you can expand on this, is like why they chose live service. I mean, it just fits in live service because they can like keep telling their story. And I kind of like think of it as like Half-Life. Half-Life was a big hit because it did environmental storytelling, and with this extraction shooter, and just kind of like this live service where the story evolves, they can kind of like tell a story in ways, kind of like similar to what they've learned from the two Destiny games, like through environmental storytelling and all this stuff. And they're not even doing it only just environmental storytelling. There's storytelling in just about every single format you could think of. But I don't know. It's pretty unique, and they're kind of doing something new. And I think they want to do something new, and that's part of the reason they did distraction shooter. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Go ahead, Ryan.
well, I was just going to say that and I know that I chatted with you for a second, I believe, Jake, were we talking about the Tarkov and the history of sort of live service storytelling and the sort of plan media like reality of that? Does that have to do with that, or was that somebody else?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the thing is that I've always been a big proponent of that this genre has possibilities in storytelling that don't exist in other genres of media.
Absolutely.
For ways that are sort of complex that I can get into later. But I think that that's one of the reasons why when I heard that there was a new, like years ago, right, when they were announced, or when it sort of leaked almost, I think, if I'm correct, right, like there was these rumors that there was a new marathon like thing, right? And then when I knew that it was going to be within this genre, it kind of instantaneously made me go, oh, well, that totally makes sense, right? And I think that to people who don't know much about what that genre does or can do with storytelling because of EFT, that was probably like a total slap in the face, right, to all these people, right? And they're just like, are you kidding me? This like story-based game, and you're going to make it into like a lot of people associate it with like Battle Royale. That's their association, right? They think it's just another version of that. And there are definitely games in that genre that can be like that. But at least for me, somebody who knew a little bit more about it, I was like, oh yeah, well, duh, totally makes sense to me. So I think that was just my reaction. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is like a very cool vehicle for storytelling, and I also think like games are kind of moving in a direction in a lot of ways where the complexity of how like they deliver their story has to change because people have been getting very similar things. It's just kind of like a natural progression of the medium, and Rilo has a bunch of time in Tarkov. I've dipped my toes into Tarkov a bit. And there are a few other extraction games that maybe try to do narrative stuff. I think Tarkov's probably the one that has the most robust
I would argue that personally, the stuff that I'm talking about is really stuff that they've only done. There have been games that have had elements of narrative, but they are much more what you'd expect from like the kind of narrative that you see in like Halo Infinite multiplayer. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's narrative tacked on, but they don't really do anything with it in the game itself, as far as like the experience that you get, and what the purpose of it is. And I think that EFT are basically a standalone in the industry as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, and like you're saying, no one else really kind of even approaching doing that, or at least when Marathon was first kind of probably put into development and stuff like that. And I think it's a very cool way for people to experience a narrative, and I think they want to try to give that the Bungie spin. I think they are great at doing world building and environmental storytelling, and hopefully they kind of go a little bit more off the deep end in what they choose to try out in terms of how they deliver that and integrate other components of it and external stuff, and hopefully they continue to try to just expand on that as they go.
Yeah.
And I think I want to say too, to the point of live service, one thing I was just going to say, because you brought up live service, right? I think it's such a hot button, buzzword, right? That has a lot of negative association with it for good reason in many cases. And I think that what's interesting to me about the storytelling defense of this genre is that it's inherently tied to live service in a really cool way. That, interestingly, I think is one of the downfalls of a game like EFT, which is that now that the game is out, I don't know what they're planning on doing in the future, but like now that the game is out, it's kind of over. Like the whole thing, like every bit of storytelling that they have been doing over the years, it's all culminated in now the main story tests and the games. And once you complete those, well, that's it. The game's done. In the way that a campaign game is done when you finish it, right? You can play it. But I think the really exciting time of that game was kind of like 2019 to 2024, 2025, when it was this constantly evolving beast, and that translated across within their game. It was in real life. It was in live action content. It was in social media, like ARGs and like all this stuff. But that was all pre-release, right? So it's like not a comes out, so it's all over, which is interesting. So that's going to be very. I'm very curious to see, what Bungie has, how they're approaching all of that stuff. That's something I talked to them a lot about actually.
Yeah. So one thing I'll just share with, we can get into it a little bit more about like our interactions with Bungie later, but one thing I want to share is like when I first heard about the game, for some reason I thought it was like a mobile game. Like this was way before the announcement trailer came out because it was just like some leaks or something. I don't even remember where it came from originally, but and I heard live, but on the topic of live service, I was like very I don't know, skeptical. Like didn't love it because I'm like, well, I like the original Marathon trilogy story because I can just go back and read it. I know exactly what's canon. It's not confusing. And then I look at like what people are saying with like Destiny and how like they took parts of the things out and whatnot. But then I kind of like, talking to some of like the community that's like excited about the game and seeing like kind of their perspective, they're kind of like, very excited about that evolving world, and it kind of like put my in perspective as like me, I don't know if my hair's gonna get gray soon or what. I'm getting little old maybe, but I just like it's like a different perspective from like what I grew up with games, and I try to like not push too much about like what I want, because it's like a lot of young people are used to games like this, and you look at like Destiny, they've been doing this for a long time. But one of my fears, I think, is like that they're gonna like release some part of the story and then it's gonna like disappear and people won't be able to experience it unless they've played the whole time. And I hope Bungie has learned a lot from Destiny for that. And I think they're getting a lot of feedback about that. So we can hope that they do a good job with how they progress these seasons. But it seems like, from what I've seen, that they're trying to be pretty thoughtful about it. So,
yeah, I mean, I do think that they are considering a lot of those things. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation around how they handled Destiny, but also I do think a nature of live service games, to a certain extent, is that it's like ephemeral. It is like, even if there is content for you to come back to at a later date, the experience of being there in that moment is something that also has value.
That's like what the thing is exciting. Yeah. It's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that is an element that they're going to lean into as well. And yeah, definitely trying to kind of maybe find that balance of like continuing to give people entry points into the story or retaining some semblance of that. You'll never capture that spark of like being there when the game launched or being there when Cryo Archive came online. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that is a nature of, the format that they've gone with, and it's another element for them to kind of expand into and explore in ways that are still, engaging and interesting. Like Rilo was talking about, doing something that not a lot of people are doing, if any at all, are currently really trying to push for. But yeah, I don't know. I do hope that maybe stuff like the Codex entry will bridge the gap and stuff, and we'll have seasonal resets, which give people entry points to get into the game. But I don't know if necessarily every little piece of story content or every little thing that's happened will always be accessible in the same way that it is. Just how like the maps will change and the environmental storytelling stuff might be something that is different down the road, and that's okay too. Kind of like life. Things come and go. In a lot of ways, you'll never be able to recreate the experience of playing Halo multiplayer for the first time, what that energy was like, despite the fact that it's still around today in some format that you can experience.
yeah, and I just will also add, like even if we like don't like the way the new game goes or we think it ruins the story or something, you don't have to consider it canon yourself.
Yeah, the old games are still there. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that there are essentially sort of two minds, and you either find yourself in one way or another. But like, I think there are people that are excited by the prospect of things changing in a story world or physically, right? Apps changing, things evolving. And there are people that find the thing that they like and they do not want it to change. And let me tell you, as a person coming from the Tarkov fields, that is not a unique thing to like fans of old Marathon or something, right? There's still a lot of people that are like, you boycott the game after a certain point. You change this map in this way. They don't like it anymore. They change how the gun handle. They don't like it. You know, like this is the thing in every game, especially multiplayer, right? But I think that, like, to your point, Jake, like, I feel like it's like, if you're someone like me who is of the mind where it's like, if I've experienced something once or a few times, I don't necessarily want to spend the rest of my life experiencing that exact same thing over and over again. You know what I mean? So it's like, and I think that you're never necessarily going to be able to capture, if we're just talking about a live service game, right? Like if you really like, you know, let's say I personally was a huge fan of Apex Legends seasons like 0 through 3. That was when I was like really into it, you know? And if they fully brought back how the game was back then, I'm not going to all of a sudden just, my mind's not going to transport back to how I felt at that time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just never coming back. So even if you like never change something, it doesn't mean that the way that you experience it will never change either. So I'm personally one of these people where I am more interested in seeing new things and in seeing things evolve, even if it means that something that I did like at some point, you know, evolved in some way. I just think that's the nature of, like, you know, being able to see new stuff sometimes within a universe that you like, right? You know, so I think in Destiny it's different because in that case it's more of a linear experience story wise, right? Like you don't want to have a raid or something that's very cool. Like that feels more like a mission of a game. Like I don't want to be able to. I don't want to go into Halo 3 and as soon as I got to the next mission, I can't play the last one, right? Like that's intuitive. So I think it's more about doing that in a way that it feels like something is evolving in a way that's interesting and exciting. And it doesn't feel like you're eliminating something that's cool and that's all that's happening, you know? So it's definitely a line to walk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to transition into just kind of like some of the, you know, not necessarily so much marathon specific, but some of the reasons that, because I think some people just don't like Bungie in general. Like they're kind of like upset with Bungie. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. I think some of it has to do with Bungie has changed a lot since its inception. Like Bungie today is nothing like Bungie in the 90s or whatever. You know, at one time people were upset because Bungie started making Windows games and not Mac exclusives. But you got like a bunch of different eras of Bungie, like, you know, before they got bought by Take-Two, you know, during Microsoft, you know, Activision, Sony, Destiny era, like Halo era, like all these very different eras of Bungie are like very different. Like they kept a lot of the same cores, but you know, another thing you don't think about is like people realize is that Bungie's actually like stopped and started as a company multiple times. Like, for example, like when they joined Microsoft, you know, who was in charge of Bungie and their ownership changed, and legally they became a new company, even though it's still Bungie. But I think you know, that's just something to keep in mind about like Bungie's history and, you know, why, you know, and there's people that are still upset, you know, today that, you know, they joined Microsoft, you know what I mean? Some people felt like they got left behind because they were making Mac games before that. Like at one point people were playing Pathways into Darkness and Marathon, and just like Bungie was like their company, you know, whereas Doom was for the Windows guys, but they had Marathon, right? And I think that's something to think about. Like, so there's a bunch of different perspectives of, you know, people in different camps of, you know, maybe why they're upset with Bungie. And I think people have like legitimate reasons. You know, so I think that's just something to think about. You guys can add into that if you want, but
Yeah, I mean, things change and companies change and people attach themselves to, you know, the people who make the things they like. And I think that's kind of like the natural relationship between like artists and creators and people who like engage with the stuff that they make. And I get why people, feel sore about certain things. But ultimately that comes back to the same thing. It's like, are you really chasing old Bungie? Or are you chasing like being young and having that experience for the first time? What was going on in your life? I feel like a lot of that sentiment probably comes from like the old times. Yeah, I wish the old times, I miss them. Things were good, but yeah, things change, and Bungie has definitely been through a lot. I think all game companies, right? And the kind of volatile industry that they exist within, and existing in this kind of weird space between like being, an artistic pursuit and then also selling like a product on such a large scale is always going to create some tension in a bunch of different ways, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the, or I guess should say, my suspicion is that, other than like the old school like marathon fans, but let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things, we're the minority. I think the biggest backlash actually is from Destiny 2 fans. I don't know. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think I'm off base? What do you think? Kind of like how they're not supporting Destiny 2 anymore and they're kind of going in a new direction. I think a lot of Destiny fans got burnt out for various reasons. I don't know. Maybe you guys can help me with that thought.
I will just
I
say
mean,
I have no idea, and I don't
yeah.
follow any of this at all. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I will say like I'm not like a huge Destiny person. I've played it since meeting a lot of people who are into like modern Bungie stuff after doing videos on the channel, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I do know that sometimes the vibes are not very chill with Destiny. I've seen that, but I don't know. I would assume that there's probably a group of people, yeah, who feel a little bit sore over, once again, my company's not doing what I think they should do, kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know how much that comes into play with what the decisions they're making or what the overall sentiment of the game is. But I'm sure there's been a lot of headlines and stuff that might be negative, leaning towards people's experience with Destiny, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I know one of the big things that came out where Bungie got kind of the look bad was when they fired a bunch of people, and then Pete Parsons showed off his car collection, which was pretty poor timing. I asked one of the Bungie guys, I won't say who, but he was like, yeah, that probably wasn't best timing, but people get let go for a reason, and there's not it's not wrong for Pete to show his card collection if he wants to. But I think that's things like that. I also think kind of give Bungie a bad name sometimes.
I mean, the thing that I will just say is that there's definitely a level of sort of parasocialism going on with a lot of gamers and the games that they like. And
Yeah.
I think the thing I always try to tell people is that like you don't know these people, and like companies are not your friends. So
Yeah.
don't get attached to the idea of how you perceive any gaming company that you know of. You know what I mean?
Mm.
There's something terrible going on in all of them, I assume. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
it's just like I I don't. That's why I kind of just don't pay attention to much of it, because it's like I don't see one company as being, oh, these are the good guys and these guys are the bad guys. You know what I mean? There's good and bad people that work at all these companies. They do good and bad things all over the place. So they're not your personal good friend. You probably have no idea how any of it is working, and just judge the thing that comes out more than anything. Like I think that when you're more of an industry insider, if you actually work in the industry, you probably have more intelligent things to say on it. But most of us, we really don't know what's going on. That's kind of the impression I've got from
Yeah.
the more that I see of it, the less I feel like I understand, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it almost like turns into like this kind of like politics where maybe Bungie said something or did something that you kind of associate, because like people feel like, oh, my life sucks, or the government needs to fix it, or whatever the perspective is. I don't want to like go too far with the politics idea, but then it kind of becomes this perspective like this company Bungie is everything represents everything wrong with the world, right? And they're the like associated with the reason why I have these personal problems or these challenges in my life or challenges in America, whatever. And I think like, you know, Bungie's just a gaming company, you know, they have problems just like everybody else, right? But they're have some very talented devs and they're trying to make a good game for everyone. So that's kind of like my perspective on it all.
I think that's kind of why I just say that, like, companies are not your friends, and you don't need to necessarily make a moral judgment and like be
Mm-hmm.
definitive about it. Because I mean, I think that like there is an aspect of what is wrong with this world, or what is wrong with the economics of software development in basically every game company that you can think of, including the quote unquote like good ones. And if you get too attached to the idea of one of them being bad and one of them being good, you're just going to kind of like lose it. Like, a better way to put it, and yeah, I mean, it's just like you just can't get attached to all that stuff. You can't be, so parasocial about it. Not that I'm trying to like talk down to people here, but it's just like you can get everything can become very upsetting when you kind of go down a rabbit hole of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit because all three of us have had some interactions to varying levels with Bungie because during Marathon's development at some point it's at least for me that it was, I don't know if it was like a year out from really, I don't know. Anyways, they had us do some play tests and ask our opinions on some things. And some of us may have more interactions with them than others, but we'll all talk about it. But I'll go first, I guess, since I'm talking. But so yeah, like I said before, I had mixed emotions when Marathon was announced because I was like, well, it's a new Marathon game, that's cool, but it's an extraction shooter. I don't know if I will enjoy
Yeah.
an extraction shooter. It's a live service. I don't know if I'll enjoy a live service. I don't know if I want to play live service. I don't know if that's approachable. Am I going to have enough time, as an adult, to even keep up with it? You know what I mean? And I'm still trying to make Marathon games. So but I was like trying not to be too negative. I'm like, it's a new thing. Let's just, Bungie, let Bungie do the thing. But Bungie was very nice to like reach out to me, and I only had like a couple thousand subs. I'm not a big YouTuber or anything. I'm not, but having their playtests and talking to or being able to interact with some of the Bungie devs and, I know I talked with Jake quite a bit when I was interacting with them, just trying to wrap my head around, this new game and, can I even enjoy it? Am I going to be able to enjoy it? And, but I made this kind of like I didn't think the game was going to work, which is kind of like what a lot of old Marathon, I get, not even old Marathon fans, but like, I'd say old heads or, I mean, and just kind of skeptical people. I don't even know the best way to say it, right? But like I made this like Word document of like maybe some challenges and maybe some approaches that Bungie could do to kind of help with that. And I sent that Word document to them. And their response was basically like, oh, we appreciate it. But we'll just say like, don't dox the game before you try it. And I just kind of appreciated that. They were very like welcoming. They weren't offended or anything. Which that meant a lot to me, but also it meant a lot to me that they had like the confidence to say, hey, like our game is good. We think if you play it, you might like it. You know what I mean? And I think that was a really good response from them. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of other experience with other game companies, but everyone that I talked to has been very kind and professional, and yeah, it's been a interesting, path seeing how everything played out. But everyone has been very kind to me and very cool.
Anyways, so let's we talked about some of the things with like Bungie specifically as a whole. So now I want to talk about Marathon specifically and somewhat like maybe the negative perceptions that aren't just that I don't like Bungie as a whole, right? Which if you feel that way, that's okay. But maybe more so just directed just at Marathon specifically. And I think one of the first things is that players are going to say, well, it doesn't have a single player campaign. or other modes, it's only an extraction shooter. It's like how was that like faithful to the original game? You know what I mean? And I think that, and like there's a lot of people that are like, I don't want to play a PvP game. I just want to, they're like, why can't they just make a mode that is only PvE, so I can just experience the story and try it and do that. And I think kind of my thoughts is that, like, we kind of talked about how there will be a lot of story in it, but I think like with the PvP part, I think Bungie, like, the sense I got from Bungie is that they're shooting a very specific feel for their game, and they're trying to execute that at a very high level. I feel like their kind of perspective is if they make additional game modes or a single player campaign, it's going to draw away from the resources from that specific game that they're trying to shoot for and that specific feel. And they're just trying to make one specific way of playing the game that is at a super high quality level to keep people coming. What do you guys think about that?
Think about what specifically? What are you asking?
I'm just seeing if you have anything to add on to that, I guess.
No, not really. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that it's something that I think I told you
Mm-hmm.
is that for the response of like, oh, I don't want to. This isn't the format that I want to experience this thing. I think that's honestly valid, and I don't have any argument against it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people need to.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't try to convince somebody, oh, you need to experience it in this way. You're really missing out. Like, I don't. I'm not going to say that to anyone. You know what I mean? Like, my response when Destiny came out was that I was like, hey, I really like the other games that this developer has made. I'm a huge fan of them. I don't really care for this genre of game. And that's kind of where it ended. And I was like, I'm not really going to play this, and that's it. Like, it's just like, I think that's fine. I think people are fans of different things. I think that the thing you got to recognize is that this studio specifically, kind of like I was saying earlier, are people where it kind of feels like they're, to your point that you said earlier, they've always wanted to sort of be on the cutting edge of the, FPS general area. And that means that they're always going to move in a new direction. And that's not always going to connect with everyone. Maybe to the point that they, lose all of their original audience. That's definitely possible, right? But I think that's just the nature of trying to be, doing something that is on the edge and that is new. You can't always, satisfy who your audience was 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not necessarily possible. That doesn't, I think, as I said, it doesn't mean that you're not going to connect with any of that audience. Obviously, plenty of people have. But it's just that, like, I'm not going to be able to tell anyone just because they really believe in this thing that they're doing and think that it's very good. And other people think it's very good doesn't mean you're going to think it's very good and that it's going to connect with you, right? Like, I think tons of people obviously think Destiny is great. It's not for me, and I never really tried to make it. You know what I mean? So that's just what I think.
Yeah,
as far as the shift in direction goes.
I agree with you too. I agree with you completely on that. But I do think specifically, like, a lot of, I think the extraction genre is also smaller. Extraction shooter genre is smaller than other genres, and a lot of people like just haven't played games in it. And like you told me before, Rilo, is there's like a wide range of extraction shooters. Like, extraction shooter is a very broad genre, and like our creators,
yeah, ill-defined is the way I.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of people, like Bungie was telling me, like, you just try it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Like, they didn't say don't, if you don't like it, it's fine, but they basically said just try it. You might like it. That's basically. And I think for a lot of people, this is like a new kind of food. If it seems interesting, maybe try it. If you don't like it, you can move on. That's okay, Anyways, I want to talk about like the art style, because the art style, graphic realism, kind of becomes a hot debate. I mean, both of you guys have both made excellent videos talking about the art style. So maybe either one of you can talk about maybe why some people don't like it, what's good about it, just that kind of thing.
Well, I'm actually so interested to hear what you all have to say before I say anything.
Well, I think the thing that I found about the art style, I'm like a layman, like I'm not a graphic designer or like a visual artist in any capacity. I'm just, a dude who looks at shit and goes like, oh, I like that, or, I think it's cool. And so I was very fortunate that, through the process of making videos and meeting people online, I met a lot of artists who were, also looking at Marathon and thinking it was very cool. And so through that, I had met Michael Veselowski, who's a graphic designer, and he helped me kind of, articulate that concept of, God, this shit looks pretty rad, into, a more thoughtful video about the kind of design elements and the language that they're building here to visually represent the world. I think like the thing that stands out to me is that it's just something that's unique, and it's iterating on a lot of visual elements that I think have been very cool going back, looking at Ghost of the Shell and Wipeout and a lot of these, kind of things that they're iterating on conceptually. And I think in a modern context, if you look at like, major big budget media, there's not a lot of stuff that has the same visual presentation of Marathon. So I think anytime you have somebody who's doing something that's, unique or different, I think that has the opportunity to connect with an audience who are going to appreciate that new visual style. And I've personally just found, like anecdotally, that a lot of people who are within the Marathon community are people who are very much so inspired by the visual presentation of this world and the art direction of Joseph Cross and all the assets that they release as they put them out. And yeah, I think that's I think that's the thing, right? It looks pretty cool. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, go, yeah, please.
okay, well, I don't have much for perspective. When you ask me, like, so I'm like an engineer. So when you ask me about, what do I think about the art, I feel like it's like an architect asking me, does my building look good when I'm the engineer? But
that's like such a valuable perspective. You know what I mean? Like, I think that for someone like me, I have such a specific taste, and I'm interested in the things that I am, and I know what I know. And it's very, very difficult for me to imagine a layman's perspective on things. Like, really, it is. And so I love hearing, like, I try to surround myself with as many people that don't have the taste or the background that I do as I can, because it really gives me perspective on like how your average person comes across this stuff. And I'm so interested in people who do like it and who don't like it and why. Right. So
yeah. So my more engineering mind, I'm like, when I look at the graphical style, I'm like, well, they want it to look good. So like there's the realism part, but it's not just realism, it's graphic realism. And I think some of that has to do with, if you try to make a realistic looking game, historically, I mean, I guess it's not as much today, but eventually that art style kind of like dies out, right? As computers advance and you get your new consoles and everything, and if you're trying to make a game that lasts, maybe a Marathon lasts a decade since its live service and it keeps going and keeps bringing people back. I don't know how long Destiny's last, but they probably lasted close around a decade. I don't know what it is. I'm just guessing. But I think like with the graphic realism, like you create a specific art style that you can't really like just replicate. It's kind of like its own kind of taste. I feel like it's kind of like timeless. It can just, attract, for the people who like the way it looks, it's going to look good, forever, 100 years from now. So it never will go out of style. So I think that's, or not out of style, but out of the visual taste it's giving. It'll never get dated. So that's kind of my engineering perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so a style that exists outside of time was definitely a factual goal for the art designers. Like, I know that for a fact. That was partially the reason that they were inspired by stuff like Mirror's Edge, Breath of the Wild, certain other few gaming examples. I would really have to go back to my files here. I have all this stuff written down somewhere, but I know that timelessness was a big thing. They were like, when they were when they first started conceptualizing the game, the goal was going to be essentially high fidelity realism, right? Hyper realism. So like better, quote unquote, better looking than Destiny, right? Like they wanted it to be shinier, more new, right? Like just that kind of like in the very basic way that people say games look good, right? Like that, just like high fidelity, very, graphically intense. That was the original goal. And I think that for performance reasons and for engine limitation reasons and all these things, they were like, okay, this maybe isn't the greatest idea. And what if we, instead of just making a game that looked like the same as Destiny, but like, maybe potentially not even as good, we tried to do something that was more timeless. Again, Breath of the Wild, Mirror's Edge, these games that are, graphically dated when they come out, but are essentially look as new as if they came out yesterday, because what is making them look visually interesting is not just ray tracing, high quality textures, right? It's about something else. So I think you're on the money as far as that's concerned. I think that's very interesting that you connect with that aspect of it. I think that, do you have any more specific questions about what you wanted to talk about art style wise?
Just wherever you want to go, wherever you want to go with it, whatever is on.
Oh, that's not. I don't want you to tell me that. You gotta give me some barriers here. I'm gonna lose my mind.
1 minute. What's most exciting to you about Marathon's art? Go.
To me, it was a sort of esoteric thing where it was like, this is so specifically up my alley as far as the kind of stuff that I like to draw myself as a visual artist, and the taste that I have and the immediate connections that I made with other stuff that I like, while also doing something that I had never seen before in a very specific way. I think that's the best way that I could put it, right? It like did all those things at once. It was like instantly relatable. I instantly saw what it was inspired by, and it also had a quality that I had never seen attempted. And I think that, and I'm talking about like the initial reveal trailer now, right? So some of the aesthetics have changed over time, and I still think that I connect with that early stuff the most of all of it. Even to this, having seen so many things in game that I really love, there's still a quality of those cinematics that kind of probably could never be replicated in a real game, right? But it's just more the art style for me is really what connected me to the game in the first place. Not even necessarily what I thought the game would really look like, but it was just the style. I was just like, it's rare that something looks that new. And I think there's only a couple examples I can think of in my life of being, wowed by that in that way. So that's just what I would say.
Yeah, it definitely has this like feel that like is unique and draws your attention. Like you just, it doesn't look like anything you've seen before. I think it's interesting. At minimally, it's interesting. I can see why some people hate it, but yeah, I can also see why some people love it. But I think I like it overall, but I think some of it I don't like as much as others. But I don't have to like all of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. Like I'm a huge fan of the style in general. There's all kinds of designs in the game that I don't really like very much.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's ever been a game that I've liked every design. You know what I mean? Like, it's rare.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with the art style, it's always going to be plagued by the whole anti-real situation. I think it's really overblown by the community a ton. Personally, like I think what happened was very unfortunate and a huge. I see it as mostly a QC fault at Bungie. QC failure. But that stream where Joseph Cross was the whole Joseph and Joe Ziegler where they both were like looking pretty down, and the whole chat is just plagiarism will make me God. Seeing Bungie come back from that, it's almost like a meme at this time. It's like, even though it was a test spot, it's almost kind of like funny to me. I don't know, maybe I have a sick humor. But
I mean, you could say they came back from it. I don't know if I would say that.
Yeah, I know, right? You can't really come back from that, but
well, it's that whole situation is very frustrating to me in what happened, but also it's like a doubly frustrating thing because it's like what actually happened is extremely frustrating to me. And then how people's reacted to it is even more frustrating. And so it's like everyone, including me, lost in that situation. Like
I'm mad at everybody.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like it's and that happens sometimes where you're like,
yeah, for sure.
You feel like I feel like such a dweeb sometimes about it, where I'm just like, you guys are angry, but for the wrong reasons, and like what people are mad about is like not what you should be mad about. But you should be mad, but not for the reasons that you are mad. So it's like it's a whole freaking thing. I don't know. I'm honestly like, in a lot of ways, like done thinking about it and talking about it, but it's definitely like you can't disconnect from it. So
I think the one thing I'll say is Bungie definitely screwed up royally, but at the same time, there's companies that have screwed up before, fans call them out, and they double down, right? And to see Bungie kind of at least,
I mean, or they don't, but like even then, there's been or they don't double down and they try to make things up, but it's just like pick your dev studio, kind of like what I was saying earlier. Pick your dev studio, pick your most beloved dev studio ever. Look at the Naughty Dog. The reason I think people forget why Last of Us 2 was completely, leaked online was because of a disgruntled employee trying to whistleblow about horrible working conditions at that company, right? It's like, choose your favorite dev studio. There's some horrible bad thing that they've done, probably, right? It's very rare to find one that hasn't. What is it? Making GTA, those guys are embroiled in pretty hardcore, egregious, union busting work conditions, controversy in Europe right now. There's all kinds of horrible stuff going on. I think that this one was, an example of a company that had basically, already been past 3 strikes with their community, and it was just people couldn't look past it, right? So it was even if it wasn't the most egregious thing in the world, they were just stoking a fire that was ready to explode already, So
yeah, I mean, I think like you, I'm kind of over it, so we can go to the next one. So, Jake, this is one I know you talked about. Why don't you give us the 1-minute explanation about people wanting character customization and what you think about it? You've talked about this a ton of times.
I just think I think initially based off a half interpretation of one sentence that's said in an 8-minute ARG or an 8-minute Vidoc that isn't even available anymore. There's a line about customizing yourself in interesting ways. And I just think that the very small community of people, I would say largely, who were following it over that 1.5 year period or whatever after 2023, when they weren't talking super publicly about Marathon, that group of people kind of had it in their head that it was going to play in that regard or be similar to Destiny, I guess, in some capacity, where it's you're, changing everything about your runner, and maybe the modular nature of those kind of initial runner piece of concept art that we got, which I feel were more kind of neo-future soldier type people with these very slick pack and tactical gear kind of setup. People thought that was maybe hinting at a more modular nature of character customization. And then there was an IGN article where it's an insider had leaked that when Joe Ziegler, who is coming from Valorant, which is a hero shooter, had come born, that it had shifted direction towards a hero shooter. And I think that in conjunction with the fact that Bungie was still in a period where they weren't speaking publicly about the game, just created that kind of space, and kind of like what Rilo was just talking about, a community of Bungie people who already are feeling a lot of big emotions. And I think people maybe latched onto this idea that it was going to be a certain type of game, and then they reveal it and it's a slightly different type of game, and I guess in some regard, and that kind of expectation was not met in some way. But I think ultimately, the amount of people who are going to play Marathon, probably a very small number of those people maybe were aware of that. Largely, I think it just comes from kind of like the anti-real thing, in some ways, the discourse around the game is bigger than the game itself. And a lot of the people who are talking about it and have very large platforms, and not anything against them, they're just not super informed, because how would you be informed on this very niche,
super specific, little details.
Exactly. And they're just, and so they have an opinion or parent idea of this. Also, it's you can't really, you can't just entirely disregard the fact that Concord exists. I think that is like ET isn't even like a fair enough comparison in a lot of ways. There's things that happen in industries that I think are so profound in terms of the impact that they have on the way the businesses operate. And I think that was just a project that also happened to be a hero shooter or have similar gameplay elements in certain regards to what people are thinking about with Marathon. That I think everything that is even High Guard and games that are entirely unrelated genre wise in a lot of ways. But any game that people dislike, I think, is going to get roped into this Concord thing, and that's kind of brain broken a lot of people. And I'm sure that was an element to it as well. I mean, you got to think about August of 2024, which once again, very niche knowledge about a small project that Bungie wasn't even talking about. But think about how August 2024 played out for Bungie. It was 2 months earlier, a hero shooter article from IGN everyone has bad reaction to. Then Bungie layoffs, then Concord failure, then Christopher Barrett gets, fired from the company due to the inappropriate behavior. So it's like that was a month that I think really shaped the discussion around Marathon going into.
That's such an interesting picture you just painted. I never really considered those things, but that's so interesting.
Yeah. I just the timeline of it, and it's one of those things where it's like there's a parasocial element to it, but it's like, God, imagine being on that team, right? Imagine being part of this. You're making a product, and that's the talk about it. And hey, by the way, you're leading into when the marketing is going to start picking up for it. So I think that was probably an element of it too. But yeah.
I will just say, if I can speak a little bit more to the specifics about the actual game design and like what people's perceptions of, the game, what their perceptions were that the game was going to be, and what I think the reality actually was, because I still think it's been quite misconstrued.
Okay,
I think
go ahead. Yeah.
From what I can gather, and how I will just say caveat, I'm not one of the people that was actually down there playtesting the game 3 years ago. I know people who were, but
you should have been.
One thing I wasn't even making. No, dude, I wasn't even making content back then. Like, you gotta understand.
They should have known. They should have known. I'm just kidding.
You gotta understand how new I am in a lot of ways. The idea that the game was going to have, I think a lot of us had this perception. I, myself included, totally had this perception, right, based on some of that concept art from the original Vidoc, that we were going to get this sort of very Escape from Tarkov like heavy focus on gear and customization based on not only appearance, but on the kit that you bring into the world, directly affecting the way that you look and the way that your character acts, right? You can see that in a lot of the way the characters were designed. They're super modular looking. They have all these kit all over them, bags and, pouches and wires and all this stuff, right? I think that there's a little bit of misconstruing what the characters looked like with the actual game functionality. If you also look back at a lot of that era, you see very clear shell archetypes. You see what looks like a hacker kind of girl that looks very thief-like. You see a robotic looking guy that is very Rook, almost like, sort of in between Rook and Medic that we have now. You see a very obvious Mjolnir looking soldier. So I think, now this is a complete, I just want to, again, reiterate 3 times. This is a complete conjecture. But from what I can tell, based on what I have talked to people on the art team about, there was definitely a time when there were not named characters. There was just, you customize your own guy. However, I don't believe that there was ever a point in which it was to the depth that people think that it was. I think the sort of core and augment system that we have now was probably always a big part of the game. And I think that what it was is, I think maybe that was all it was. And there wasn't the named characters with their special abilities that we have now. I think that everything was based on things that you applied to your character. I think all the abilities were still there, all the little build crafting elements. I just think that they didn't have the characters with base abilities. But other than that, I think how the game works now is probably relatively similar in how you customize your character. I think that the line in the Vidoc about you'll be able to, I wish, Jake, that you had the exact thing that they said, because it's like,
I think it's literally you'll be able to visually represent yourself in creative and interesting way. It's something like that. Right. Yeah.
So what I think, I'm going to be so real. What I think that she meant when she said that, I think she's literally talking about skins. Yeah, I think that's all it was. Yeah. I think it was literally that you could put skins on your character. I'm dead ass. I think that that's what it was. And people took that to mean, based on the concept art, that it was going to be this deep Tarkov-like customization system, right? And what I do know is that in the old version of the game, the original one it was all about the artifacts. It was like this mix between Hunt Showdown and like the Cycle Frontier, right? Where it was like this objective based thing in the persistent world. I think that in that version of the game, they were already shifting more towards the named characters, because I know that shift happened a longer time ago than people realize, right? And I know that, like, based on what I've talked to people on the art team, like, that, again, just sort of guessing because I didn't get like super detailed in there, but I know that the version of the game that we have now had been being iterated on quite a while ago, and that the version with the completely open, persistent world raid thing was scrapped like at least like 3 or so years ago, and that was also when the like named runners started showing up. So I think that by the time that Vidoc was like, the transition point happened like kind of right after that Vidoc came out, is from what I can tell. And so that's just more of just me getting in the weeds of that. I think that whole conversation is a little bit interesting, but the other thing that I just want to sort of remind, if there's one thing that I want to remind people about, I don't want to tell people that they should like this or whatever. One thing that I do want to remind people about, though, is similar to the conversation about PvE and PvP and Arc Raiders that it goes on if you follow that game at all. A lot of people played the old version of the game. And what I know is that almost everyone universally said that it was like really bad. So whatever version of the game is that we have now is significant. Like there's this idea I think that floats around that like, oh, the game used to be so cool and they just like added in heroes and they made it bad. No, the old game was bad. Like, let's not get that wrong. Like, no one liked it. It was extremely boring. Like, I've heard this firsthand from people that played it. So I just thought I want to at least, as much as I can to anyone that will listen, try to like put that point across. Because in the same way that people go like, oh, they should have just had PvE and only in Arc Raiders. Why does it have PvP? It's like, yeah, no, they did, and it was bad. So like, don't, sometimes the game developers test things and they change things based on the results. So anyway, that was my long rant about that. But.
No, yeah, absolutely.
I have a couple thoughts. So one with the character customization, I was pretty happy because Bungie released that pretty much all the monetization is going to be like shells and cosmetics only. So there's no like pay to win unless you consider having a better looking shell as pay to win. But anyways,
I would say yes, it is.
Yeah. So
I think it makes you cooler.
So the thing is like. It's a shame what happened to Christopher Barrett, but I think what I have a gut feeling that part of like Marathon being Marathon tied to an old game has a little bit to do with Christopher Barrett and why he was on the team, and a lot of like the old artistic style.
Well, hold on. Just wait. Just to be clear, it's not a shame what happened to him, because what happened to him was he had inappropriate conduct with his employees, and then he was fired for it. So I don't know any of the details of that, but
what I meant was a shame what he did. I meant what a shame what he did. I meant the shame of the whole circuit of stats. Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah. Thanks, Jake, for correct, because that did sound bad. Yeah. But anyways, what I was trying to say is, I think Christopher Barrett is a very talented developer, and he got fired for good reason. But I think that like he did have a major impact on the game and where it started from. And Christopher Barrett is someone who came to Bungie from Myth days, so he's been there a very long time. And Myth came after Marathon, and so I think Marathon played anyways. And I think in the artistic style, like Christopher Barrett is traditionally an artistic guy. And so I think he had a huge influence on like the art style that we saw in the reveal trailer. But I don't know a lot about art, but if you could customize,
I don't know. Do we know that?
No, what? Well, we don't know that. It's a hunch. Yeah. It's a hunch. So, it's probably mostly Joseph Cross, but I think Christopher Barrett was probably playing a hand in it too. Not necessarily. Anyways,
and some other people. I just want to say I want to give a shout out to like Daniel Chavez and
the whole team. There's
some specific people though that I know that were like kind of the OGs of developing that style specifically. That obviously Joe Cross has become sort of the figurehead of the art team, but there's a lot of other people that had a huge hand in that I had a chance to talk to. That was pretty awesome. So Tobias Kwan, obviously huge, and then a bunch of other people that people don't even really know their names of because they just aren't online like that. That are also super important to developing style.
I do think though, like for where Marathon is today, it was a huge blessing that they brought in Joe Ziegler, and I think he had a huge influence on getting the game where it is. And I think, having some of that old Marathon roots with Christopher Barrett and then transitioning to a more modern FPS game dev like Joe Ziegler, I think helped shape Marathon into what it is today tremendously. Again, that's kind of a hunch, but I have a feeling that's what the case is. But going back to the character customization a little bit, if you like, part of the reason I think the artistic style in that reveal trailer looks so good is because, and this is my limited art style speaking, but it's like the color theory where you have like 60, 30, 10, right? And it kind of like the 10% kind of draws your eyes to specific things. And so I think that was part of like why that artistic style looks so good in the reveal trailer. And so what that means is that if you customize every part of your character, you probably wouldn't choose that color palette, and your character would probably look pretty dumb if you didn't follow those rules. So that's just something to think about when you're looking at that reveal trailer and trying to customize your character. So
yeah, I mean that was where my mind went kind of initially after seeing it, as I was like, oh, this would be so sick. I could make my guy look so cool. And then I also went, oh wait, but everybody else will make their guy look really dumb. Wait, this is a bad idea. So it's interesting for sure.
Yeah.
So what I'd like each of you guys, what I'd like each of you guys to do is try to tell people why they should try Marathon, and if they're gonna give Marathon a chance, how they should approach it, or how you would recommend them approaching it to give them like, yes, you tried it. This is, if you don't like it at this point, it's not worth going any farther, or maybe here's the best shot of you enjoying it and trying to understand it. What do you guys think?
You shouldn't try it unless, actually, you know what? You should try it. You should try it only because I want to have somebody who I'm actually better than, as everybody who's now played the game is better than me. So yes, we need some new.
We need the Christmas noobs.
Yes, you should try it. Yeah, try it just so you.
We need a cannon fodder. I am the cannon. They'll still come and they'll still be better than me. I guarantee it.
I mean, kind of like I said before, like I don't think you should try it. Like I don't know how else to say that. Like I think that with any game, I've always just been sort of the mind that if you see something and you think it looks sick, try it out. If you see something and it looks bad to you, then like there's a chance that you won't like it, like higher likelihood than that you will somehow like all of a sudden like this thing that you really thought you weren't going to like. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Yeah. So like I can't necessarily tell people, especially like art direction wise, like if you look at the game and you're like, I hate looking at this game, it's so like ugly to me, I don't think you're going to play the game for 20 hours and suddenly you're going to like how it looks. Like that's not likely. It's possible, but that's not, that's not really how things work. So I mean, I think that there's definitely a huge amount of potential for people who are interested in the aesthetics of it, in the lore of it, and all that kind of stuff, and maybe aren't sold on the game type, to maybe discover that there is something to the game type that they like. But I don't know if I can convince anybody of that, because I went in really being into the thing that it was going for, like very specifically, like this is like my thing. You know what I mean? So it's like it's tough for me to tell somebody that isn't their thing, that they should try it. That's just up to you. You know what I mean? Like any person out there.
Yeah. So, but when I first met Rilo from one of the, just through Bungie. So I met Rilo through Bungie. We had a good discussion, and you were kind of talking about like how, the extraction shooter genre really is more, favoring to the older generation, because it's more about the decisions you're making rather than just having the best aim, and just kind of the excitement for it. Maybe you can just talk about that for a minute. Do people understand?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's. I think the thing that I find exciting about that kind of game specifically, it was funny. I was just talking to like my mom about this because I was, I was explaining that oh, one of the things that I like about Marathon is it reminds me of the vibe I got from Apex Legends when I was really into that game. The difference being that in Apex Legends there is one win condition, which is win. Be the last one standing. That's it. And there's a couple different ways to do that, but for the most part, it's a game of, shooting skill and movement, and there's kind of just like a formula. And the thing that I think is interesting about this genre, and kind of to your point, why some people that aren't necessarily the most cracked, 14-year-olds who are just, really insane with their aim, is that there are many ways that you can be successful, not just in the classic way, you can be successful because you looted a cool thing and then left. No, like you can be successful in PvP, not being as good at shooting as somebody else because you're smarter than them, And I think that there's a lot of potential for that in this genre because of the freeform kind of nature of how a round works that isn't possible in a standard arena shooter or in a battle royale or in various kinds of games. It's very... I compared it, it's like the baseball of shooter genres, there's like a lot of it that might seem boring when you don't really understand what it is that is going on, or that the pace of it can be slower, but then there are these moments that if you did something intelligent and if you thought 4 steps ahead of what you're doing, you can pull off stuff that will make somebody else feel like they got cheated on, because they're like, how did this person just like kill me out of nowhere? And it's like, no, because I was 3 steps ahead, and I think that that's the thing that makes people like me interested in it. And that, is different from other types of games.
I'm so happy that you made the baseball comparison. I was just talking to Scaro on this podcast and he was shitting on baseball. I was like, what the fuck is wrong? Yeah, because it's what you're saying. If people don't know, they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think it is a comparison, I think, that I make on purpose in the good and bad ways, and that a lot of people think baseball is really boring because they don't understand what's going on. In a lot of ways, people look at Escape from Tarkov gameplay and they're like, who finds this? You're telling me this is the game you think is the most like exciting game you've ever played? You're just like looking at a bunch of squares for like an hour. Like, what are you talking about, right? Yeah. But it's like it just requires, and I think that that's the curse and blessing of Marathon right now. And I think a lot of the feedback that we're seeing is people having that experience of when they first get into it, it does not grab you instantaneously with bombast and, sparks and spectacles, right? Like it's one of these experiences where the longer that you spend in there and the more time that you understand the systems and you see the patterns, then things become really exciting. But that is also a problem because it means that people jump in and they're like, what is this? This is boring. I died. And then they don't play the game anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a good and a bad thing. And that's the thing of this genre. That's why it's a super risky genre to try to make, a AAA game in.
Absolutely.
My first experience with an extraction shooter was playing Marathon, in it was a closed test, so there's hardly anybody in the servers. You have to wait like 5 minutes to get in, and every time I get on, could only play when Bungie wasn't working, so I'd be in a server all by myself just fighting UESC all alone and trying to extract. And that was, I'll just say, for the people that want to play only PvP, it was very boring. It was not fun.
Only PvE, you're saying?
Yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, only PvE. It is not fun. And then my next experience with PvP was on, like, Bungie had like this. I think we could say that. I don't think this is on NDA or anything, but they'd have like a day where like they would all take their loot that they got from probably playtesting the game that week, and all go in solo and lose all their loot to each other, probably because they're going into the next version of the game for the next week or whatever it was, right? And they'd all kill each other. And so like then I'd go in with all these people that have played each other a bunch, and my only experience with PvE, and I just lose all my stuff and get killed, and I don't think I had a single kill. And then all these probably like, the only other players that were in were big extraction shooter, YouTubers or Twitch streamers, with, thousands and thousands of hours in extraction shooters, and and thousands of people that watch them, right, when they play. So yeah, that was my first experience with Marathon. It wasn't I was pretty much like, I don't know if this game is going to be fun or for me, but I think when it really started clicking for me personally was when I played with other people, and I played with the three people as the way Bungie intended it, or that the original way they crafted it. And I started to be like, well, part of what makes Marathon so fun is there's so much, like, the art style, there's so much interesting things in the world and so much stuff they're telling with the story, and you get to experience it with your friends and your community. And I think that's where, like, it really clicked for me. It's like, man, like, if I am only good at, like, I'm not the best shooter or whatever, I can have my team that I'm just having fun with. We can get on a roll. We can work together and kind of take out other teams, and kind of, we'll die a lot, because there's always that challenge, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I think it's just like the way you can experience the game with other people just brings the whole game to a whole another level. So I know a lot of people, like, want this, like, they talk about this solo or this PvE experience without being online. But I think that, like, Bungie made it 3 players for a reason, and everything is catered to that. And until you really, like, play it the way, put all your preconceived notions about what you don't like the game, the way the game is, and try it just once or twice. I know the game's out, you have to buy it now, but until you, like, really try it the way they intended it, you're not really gonna, at least for me, I didn't enjoy it until I got to that point. So that's just what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had the kind of, like I said, I'm usually a person that plays games solo. I would prefer that experience in most cases. But it brought me back to the feeling of older Apex, of the not in, like, the way that the game literally plays. There's some similarity, but more just the feeling of being in a 3 stack where you're trying to play off of each other's, strengths in ability and whatever, and take advantage of position. That sort of aggressive, fast paced thing. I was like, man, I haven't felt this in a while, and it was very fun. That's what made me click for me most recently, because I was always a more solo guy, and I was, like, kind of just concerned about this game in some ways, where I was like, if this game isn't able to be fun solo, which I think some people are enjoying it solo, but I was like, if that isn't possible, I don't know that I'll be able to enjoy the game at all, but giving it a shot in the intended way, I saw the magic of that. I still think that the squad fill is not the way in this game. I don't know if you guys have
play with friends. Yeah, you gotta play with friends to really, experience that magic, I think. But
which is tough, because if you're like me and you have no friends, then it's like, what are you gonna do?
Well, Rilo, I'll play with you. I'll be your friend. I only have, like, 2,500 subscribers. I don't have any friends either, so I'm just. I was in like the Bungie Discord.
Not equal friends. That doesn't mean anything.
I have 2,500 friends. So I was in the Marathon Creator Discord, right? And I was just like, when I first came, it was like all these big YouTubers like Astrocross and Hidden Xperia and other people, but I don't even know if I should say who's in there, but it doesn't really matter. But anyways, it was just kind of funny, because I feel like, well, I'm this little guy. Hi guys, I'm here.
Yeah, but you're like you were the marathon guy, though.
Yeah, I know, right? I was. Well, Jake was too. Jake was the man.
No, but like the marathon guy, like the old marathon guy. Yeah. Well, I was glad to see that. That was like one of the things that I was like, hey, that's cool. Well, like, obviously I wasn't familiar with who you were, but I was just like, oh, that's cool that they have specifically brought in someone that is like a big, like, majorly only a fan of the old games. Like, that's like that seemed valuable,
Well, I did start on Myth, but yeah, I evolved into Marathon. Yeah. Anyways, that's a story for another day. But yeah, thanks you guys for coming on. I think hopefully this helps some people. I mean, if it doesn't, I don't really care. But I think I just wanted to share my perspective and some of the experience I had, and some of my friends, Jake, and the expertise of Rilo, just helping us understand extraction jitters, that helped me a lot. And I just kind of wanted to share that with everyone so that everyone could experience that too, or at least have a chance to experience it. So thanks, guys.
No worries, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you, dude. Thank you.
Yeah.